On today's show, we preview the 2022 World Series between the Astros and the Phillies. Game 1 is tonight. We go over if the Astros win, what are the implications with that? Are they a dynasty? If the Phillies win, what are their implications? Where does Bryce Harper rank in the hierarchy of players if he ends with a World Series MVP? We'll cover all that and more. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. Cue the intro. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast, episode 132 for our World Series preview. Welcome, everyone. We are live at about 4:15 p.m. on Friday, about just a few hours before Game 1, just a few hours before the first pitch. And joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Wink. What's up?
I can't tell you how much fun it's been to cover this baseball season here on the Raw Prospect Podcast. I don't know about Emmy. Maybe he can speak for himself. But this has really been our first full season covering the baseball season from start to finish. From the preview at the beginning of the season to doing our all-star coverage during the middle of the season to talking about the playoff races down the stretch to talking about the beginning of the playoffs, to talking about what's happened and previewing the NLCS and ALCS, to now previewing the World Series. It's been a slog, but it's given us more to talk about on the Raw CrossFit podcast, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know about you. What's been your favorite part of covering the baseball season from start to finish, and what we look forward to going into the off season?
Yeah, I didn't catch what you said there at the end. The internet was kind of flicking out, but yeah, we're just gonna get right into this. We're gonna start off with Raw Prospect of the Week. We haven't done that in a while, so I'll just go ahead and share um, my pick of the week is Paolo Banchero, the number 1 overall pick in this past year's NBA draft. Um, he just recently became the 7th player in NBA history to have 20-point games in his first 5 games of his NBA career. Extremely impressive. And I talked about him a little bit on our NBA Western Conference preview episode yesterday, but he's just so polished as a scorer already, and thinking about what that's going to mean for the Magic in the future is just extremely exciting. So I just wanted to shine a little light on him. There was a few other guys I was thinking about as well. Kenneth Walker from the Seahawks came to mind. A few others as well. But I just think Paolo Banchero has stood out the most to me, so I had to highlight him here.
My prospect of the week, I wanted to keep with the baseball theme since we are talking about baseball today. It's going to be Jeremy Pena, who is a young shortstop for the Houston Astros, who's played fantastic this postseason. 25 years old, comes up to the majors this season to replace the likes of Carlos Correa at the position. Those are big shoes to fill. And he fills in perfectly. And in this postseason, he enters this World Series hitting 303 for the postseason with a 990 OPS. Um, he's just the fifth rookie in MLB history with 3 home runs in his first 7 playoff games. This is a history of baseball that spans over 100 years. He's the third rookie with 3 home runs over his first 7, or no, fifth rookie, excuse me, with 3 home runs over his first 7 playoff games. He's 25 years old. He just won the ALCS MVP after he had a very good series against the Yankees. He keeps on maturing. He's a clutch player, and he's filled in fantastically for Carlos Correa. You look at what Carlos Correa was able to do over his 7 seasons with the Astros in the playoffs. He was one of their great playoff performers, uh, not only for the Astros, but in recent memory in general. Um, During his Houston tenure, he had 18 home runs in 79 games. That's good for 7th on the all-time list. So he was fantastic, and Pena's well on his way to filling those shoes. So Jeremy Pena, be sure to watch his at-bats throughout this series if you haven't gotten to watch him already. But yeah, he's definitely one of the reasons that the Astros continue to just plug along and why their dominance has continued.
Yeah, and Jeremy Pena, I'll just add this real quick. Just he's a big part of what they've been able to do in this playoff run. We're going to talk about him a lot later on, so I'm not going to get into it that much now. But he's been really, really good this postseason, to put it simply. Um, Now let's just move on into our World Series preview. What you're all here for, I'm assuming, the meat and potatoes, I guess, of the episode. Um, what do you think? What are you thinking are the key? Uh, what do you have as the keys for this series?
Well, I want to start with just sort of an overlying conversation, and that is the Houston Astros have been October regulars now for they've been a mainstay in the playoffs now for the past 6 seasons. We know what the story was back in 2013, 2014, 2015, losing 100 games or 90 plus games all of those seasons, getting the rebuild going, and they come in. We know what the story is. They've been to the ALCS 6 straight years. 4 of those times they've won the AL pennant and gone to the World Series. Now, their only actual World Series title came back in 2017, and it does have an asterisk by it with that cheating scandal. Um, so, I guess the question is if they are able to finally dethrone um, an NL East opponent in the World Series, as they have not been able to do so in their past 2 appearances, as losing to the Nationals back in 2019 and then losing to the Atlanta Braves last year. Here come the Phillies, possibly the hottest team in the postseason, not named the Astros. And I guess my question is, since this will be a clean championship, not that they needed to prove themselves anymore because they keep doing this over and over again, is 2 championships in 6 years and 4 appearances in the World Series in 6 years enough, even with that cheating scandal, to call them a dynasty?
I mean, it's on the table. I think it also kind of depends on how they would win this series. I think if they dominate and crush their way to a World Series title, and say get this done in 5 games, then it would absolutely be on the table. But if they're pushed to the brink and this goes to 7, then maybe not. I think it also just kind of depends on how you view that scandal as well, because um, I've heard from a lot of people that the the cheating may not have even made them better at the end of the day, because you still gotta get the hits, and you still gotta deliver at the bat, and um, you still gotta score runs is the point. But however you think about it, um, this Astros team, they're over the course of this entire run, the heart of the team has been the pitching and the defense. No matter how much firepower that lineup had, it always started with their pitching and defense, because um, that's how you get it done. Obviously, in the postseason, things heat up and you got to score runs. But the bottom line is, you can look at this Astros run of 6 years and compare that run of pitching to really any in history, in my opinion. I'm kind of new to baseball, so that I may not know too much, but I'm pretty confident in saying that as well.
I think it's a dynasty if they win this series. Now, there are ways you can, I guess, classify it as a dynasty. I don't think it's the likes of like the Yankees in the early 90s, early 2000s, where you win 4 championships in 5 years. I don't think it's that sort of dominance. But I think when you look at the totality of what the Astros have done, um, and now that they've sort of had some of those key contributors from that 2017 team leave, now it's sort of a different roster makeup. Not a whole lot of the players are still here from that team. You have to take everything that's happened since that 2017 team, even if you think, even if you're going to hold the cheating against them, we have to give them credit for what they've been able to continue to do. And that's be in the ALCS 6 straight seasons. Um, that's something not even the Dodgers have been able to do in the NLCS or in the National League. And we know how dominant the Dodgers have been over the regular season. They're probably the only team that can compete with the Astros in terms of regular season success over the past 6 years, in regular season and postseason for that matter. But the Astros have done it over and over again. The only seasons in this 6 year stretch where they have not won over 100 games, I think, were the 2020 shortened season where they only played 60 games, and last year where they won like 98 games. So every other season in this stretch, they've won over 100 games in the regular season. They won in that 2017 team. They've been back to the ALCS every single year. They keep producing. They keep developing pitching. They develop their young players. Yordan Alvarez, Jeremy Pena are prime examples. And they just continue to win. And it might be less of a dynasty than some of the other great dynasties that we've seen. But I still think you can call it a dynasty if they win the series.
Yeah, I think so too, ultimately. But they got to win the series first, and that's what we'll get into right now. Um, the Phillies. I mean, for me personally, I think they have a great chance to win this series. I think they come in as underdogs with nothing to lose, and they already have an aggressive style of hitting. They swing at a lot of first pitches, and they swing to hit home runs. They don't. I mean, we've seen them be hitting into the gaps a little bit more in that Padre series, and be a little bit more efficient that way. But um, overall, this is a team that wants to hit home runs. I think that's pretty clear. Um, but the way that um, the way that matches up with the Astros is interesting, because um, this Astros team really works off of being able to strike people out. They don't. I think with most of this pitching staff, they want to get 7, 8, 9 strikeouts, and get those starters pitching 5, 6 innings. So, how do you think that those kind of dynamics collide with each other? What do you think about all that?
Well, I have sort of three things that the Phillies need to do to win this series. And we all know that baseball, in some ways more than other sports, is a momentum sport, especially in the playoffs. This is one of those sports like college basketball where you want to be playing your best late in the year. And I know that can sort of be said for every sport because you don't want to be playing bad going into the playoffs in any sport. But I think it's sort of accentuated in these circumstances where it's sort of when you get to the playoffs, anything can happen in 9 innings and anything can happen, during the course of a baseball series. So, I think what the Phillies have been able to do so far, 9-2 in the postseason, 5-0 in Philadelphia. I think what you want to do first of all is try to get a game in Houston. One of these first two games in Houston, and the reason that's important is because if you can get it back to Philadelphia, where you've been pretty damn unbeatable in Philadelphia, and you have 3 straight games in Philadelphia going back home before you try to push this to game 5 or 6. If you look at who the Phillies have going, you want to try to push this, not only get one of these first 2 games, not go down 0-2, because then the Astros smell blood and they will step on your neck at that point in time. But since you have the guys that have sort of been workhorses, per se, for you during the postseason, in Aaron Nola, who's going to pitch tonight against Justin Verlander, and then I think it's going to be Zach Wheeler tomorrow night against Framber Valdez, 2 fantastic pitching matchups. If you look at what those 2 guys have been able to do, they've had through the postseason, and it's sort of elevated because of one rough start that I think Zach Wheeler had in the NLCS Game 2, where he allowed 3 runs. But that duo together has pitched a combined 42 2/3 innings this postseason. That's a lot, but they pitched to a 2.23 ERA, while the rest of the Philly staff, starters and bullpen, has pitched to a 3.78 ERA in 54 1/3 innings pitched. So it's really been these 2 guys that have been able to really pitch well and hold down the fort, keep the Phillies in games, and let that offense go. So you got to ride your workhorses. They're going to have to pitch well in these first 2 games. You're going to have to steal a game in Houston and get it back to Philly, where you've been pretty good. And I think the ideal situation is extend this series, try to get this series to 6 or 7. Put the pressure back on Houston, because Houston's the favorites in this series. Put the pressure back on Houston in game 6 and in game 7, where you can have these guys pitch again. I think that's going to be important. After Nola and Wheeler, you have Ranger Suarez, you have some other guys who are capable, but there is a it's not a precipitous drop off, but it is a drop off between those top 2 guys and the other guys. Especially when you match, the Phillies 3-4-5 against the Astros 3-4-5. So I think stealing a game in Houston, one of these first 2 where you have your guys on the mound, and then getting it back to like a game 6, game 7, to where these guys can pitch again within this series. As far as, I'll let you kind of bounce off that, but one more thing I wanted to mention for the Phillies. One thing that stood out to me during the playoffs, this was a team that came in with a lot of concerns. We had a lot of concerns defensively with this Phillies team coming into the postseason. And we know, as you said, that pitching, which they've gotten, and then defense are the 2 main pillars of good postseason baseball for winning in the playoffs. And this was a team that was not very good in the regular season defensively. It's one of their weaknesses. Is one of the reasons they didn't win more games. They were 29th in outs above average at minus 35, and they were 25th in defensive runs saved, minus 34. So they weren't good at all defensively. They did make a couple moves at the trading, a couple smaller moves at the trading deadline to sort of upgrade their defense. But I think my point is you want to continue the sort of sound defense that you've been playing this postseason. That defense that I spoke of in the regular season, that Phillies defense hasn't reared its ugly head yet here in the postseason. And you just want to limit those defensive lapses. Because unlike some of the other teams that they've played so far in this postseason that maybe weren't able to capitalize on some of those mistakes, the Astros will capitalize on those mistakes. They will. They're just too good. So you want to continue to be sound defensively, just make the simple plays. Don't drop fly balls. You want to limit the errors on the infield, that sort of thing. And you'll be in pretty good shape because this offense, I think, at the end of the day, is going to hit. To what extent? Well, that's the question. So I think those are the two main things I'm looking for from a Phillies perspective if they want to pull the upset. Keep the lapses defensively to a minimum, if not none, would be great. And then you want to have Austin Nola and Zach Wheeler pitch again in a Game 6, Game 7, where you can put all the pressure back on the Astros, and have those two guys who have been workhorses for you give you a chance in those pressure games.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and one other thing I see happening is I think this Game 1 tonight, Verlander's stint could either go one or two ways, in my opinion. I think it could either be, 10, 11, 12 strikeouts because of how aggressive this Philly lineup likes to be on the plate. Or it could be 3, 4 solo home runs. It's really one or the other. I don't really see it being in between, because Verlander has been dominant for the most part, and I just think this Philly lineup, if they come out hot and swinging, I mean, they could easily take this Game 1 and catch the Astros. I don't want to say rustiness, but maybe a little bit of that.
Yeah, and I think since we're talking about the Phillies, we should talk about Bryce Harper.
Right.
Because that's a prominent conversation around baseball. And something we wanted to discuss is if this continues for Bryce Harper, a postseason where I have the stats pulled up, they are just absolutely incredible what he's been able to do on the offensive side. With his bat, he's got a .419 batting average, 18 for 43 in the postseason. That's god insane in 11 postseason games. 6 doubles, 5 home runs, 11 RBIs, 10 runs scored, and only 7 strikeouts, which is fantastic. He won the NLCS MVP for the Phillies when they beat the Padres. He's been their guy. He's been the Bryce Harper that was touted coming out of high school as the chosen one, like LeBron James was for the NBA. He was that guy for baseball. And, his regular season resume is fantastic. 2 regular season MVPs, one back in Washington. I think they both were back in Washington. One was in Philly, one was in Washington. He's got a home run derby crown as well. He's got 7 or 8 all-star appearances. He's got everything now. And if he continues this performance into the World Series and wins the World Series MVP, where do you think that places him? amongst the pantheon of not only greats in today's game, but just over the past since we've been alive. Is he one of the greatest? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, he has to be. I mean, he has the. I mean, we can't just say it's a flash in the pan. He's been there, done that. He's been in the league for I don't know. I think it's been what like 8, 9 years, right? Maybe more than that, 10.
Yeah.
Um, he's been really good in every single season. He's been consistent, and I think really this was the first time where the stars really aligned for him to where he could really show himself to be that guy in the postseason. Um, I think this was the first year where he had actually won a playoff series as in the MLB. So yeah, I think this definitely puts him a step above where he was before. Where he put him, I mean, I'm kind of inclined to put him maybe ahead of Mike Trout because he hasn't really done much in the postseason. I know that's kind of unfair to him at this point, but I think he's top five. Um, I don't know. I don't know how it's done in baseball. Is it really ranked by what position you're at, or is it just you're just ranked in general, or what? How does it work?
Well, something, I think for me at least, as someone that's been watching baseball for 5, 6 years, um, and following the game, I think this is definitely probably the greatest single player performance at the plate I've ever seen in the playoffs. Um, and that goes back, to 2015, where I've been intently watching baseball playoffs. We know back in 2020, uh, Randy Arozarena for the Rays had a fantastic postseason, but when you compare his numbers to these numbers of Bryce Harper's, it really doesn't. Like Bryce Harper makes him look silly. A 419 batting average, 7 strikeouts in the postseason with 5 home runs, a couple of which have either tied the game or given the Phillies the lead in like important like closeout games too. So he's been clutch as well. He's playing good defense. He's been a leader for this team. I think if you put his regular season performance, and something that goes overlooked with Bryce Harper is he's been incredibly durable throughout his career. I think in all but 2 of his 11 or 12 seasons, because remember, he was the guy who came up very young. He started playing when he was 19. Not a whole lot of players start in the majors at age 19. So while it seems like, he's been around a long time, well, yeah, he has because, um, he came to the league at 19, and he's only like 29 or 30 years old at this point. So he still has got a pretty good road left for his prime, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, with 2 regular season MVPs, playing 100 games year after year after year, it seems like, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 years. And one of those years was the shortened season where they only had 60 games, where he played 58 games. So he's been incredibly durable. He hits home runs. He's fun to watch. He's clutch in the postseason. Now we know that. And if he puts a ring on his finger and has that MVP of the World Series as well, he has to be up there like the top 5, 7 greatest players of this generation.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's real quick talk about the other side of things. If the Astros win, um, what does that mean for Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, and the one I'm most interested in is actually Justin Verlander.
Let's talk about Justin Verlander a little bit because we know that, what he's been able to achieve throughout his career is absolutely amazing. He's a Hall of Famer, no doubt. 9-time All-Star, 3 no-hitters in his career, 2 Cy Young Awards, maybe another one coming at the end of this postseason when they give out the awards. As he pitched to a sub-2 ERA this season at age 40. I mean, that's incredible. Coming off Tommy John surgery, by the way. He's the active, among all pitchers that are active, he's active leader in wins, strikeouts, in which he ranks 12th all time. And he's coming off, as I said, a historic year where he led the AL in ERA, WAR for pitchers, strikeout rate, strikeout to walk percentage. I mean, he's still lighting up the radar gun at 98 miles per hour. He's, had some really, really good postseason performances. He's had some gems. He's pitched a complete game before in the postseason. He's had many 10-plus strikeout games where he holds the opponent to 1 or 0 runs. But the whole that I think people have written about this week leading up to this series is you look at his World Series numbers, and they're not what you would think they would be in the World Series. He's actually 0-6 with a 5.68 ERA and 7 starts in the World Series, which he's pitched 38 innings. So it's no small sample size either. And he's allowed 9 home runs in those 38 innings. So his, those numbers don't really go with what he's been able to do leading up to the World Series in the postseason and during the regular season, where it's just been absolutely fantastic. First ballot Hall of Famer Justin Verlander. So I think if he has a couple really good starts in this postseason, or none of this postseason, in this series, maybe one really good start and then another good start, or just one good start if the Astros finish this off relatively fast, I think he can sort of put those numbers in the rear view, and people will now, I think, the noise will quiet just a little bit, because I think there is not a huge hole, but there is a hole there, as he hasn't really pitched his best in the World Series, and the numbers bear it out. So I think if he can pitch well tonight, I think it's a very important game for him. That will kind of go away, and he'll be remembered as one of the greatest all time, period. So I'm interested to see. He's coming off a really good start against the Yankees after struggling in his last start against the Mariners in that division series. I'm interested to see what he does. I mean, this is a home run hitting Phillies team. They lead the playoffs with 16 home runs in their 11 games, and they're also leading the postseason in runs per game and slugging percentage. So they're hitting for extra bases, they're hitting the ball out of the ballpark, and they're scoring runs. They're getting runners on base in front of their biggest threats, and those threats are capitalizing. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I think that's the story of Game 1, by the way. I don't think it's who wins or loses, although it is a tone-setter game for the series. It's what do we get in this pitching matchup? Austin Nola, really, really, really good for the Phillies, trying to start something, and then Justin Verlander trying to cement his legacy as a postseason pitcher with a good World Series performance. So I think that's really where it lies tonight. But for the Astros, you just got to continue doing what you do in the postseason. That's pitch, that's play good defense, and get timely hits. That's it. That's what the Astros do. That's what they'll continue to do.
Yeah, and this series is so interesting because it's the kind of the battle of the underdog story, kind of the Cinderella run versus just the complete, juggernaut of a team in the Astros. And I really just don't know what's going to happen. I'm gonna give a prediction at the end of the episode, but I'm not going to feel confident. I'll say that right now. And man, I just can't wait for this series to start. That's just where I'm at.
Yeah, I cannot wait for game one. And by the way, we're going to have our picks podcast tonight, late tonight. So tune in for that. And we have a lot of great content coming for you guys over the next couple of weeks. I know that there's going to be a college basketball preview probably next week sometime. That starts a week from Monday. There's going to be, I think we ought to talk about the NFL trading deadline as well next week on our picks podcast or sometime. More NBA content too. So be on the lookout for all that. I guess to wrap it up here, we can end this at around 40, 45 minutes. Since we're only, less than 3 hours from first pitch. Who's going to win the series? How many games? What is your gut feeling? What does your brain tell you? And based on that, who will win the World Series MVP?
I think it's going to be an absolute battle. I think it's going all 7 games. I'm taking the Astros to win in 7, and I'm going to pick Yordan Alvarez as my MVP.
Fair enough. Yeah, he's been really good so far in the postseason. I'm going to go Astros as well. I think the Phillies, as we mentioned, have definitely a puncher's chance, given the formula I laid out earlier in the episode. I think we're definitely hopefully going to get a series that goes longer than 5 games because, believe it or not, we have yet to see a series in this postseason that goes longer than 5 games. So I hope we get a Game 6 and a Game 7. I'm going to go Astros in 6. I think the difference is the Astros have 8 guys in that bullpen that Dusty Baker trusts in any situation.
Right.
And the Phillies have 3 guys who have been really good, but then after that, it's a little bit of an unknown. You're venturing into a little bit of an unknown territory after the David Robertsons of the world and the 2 other guys that they have. I know David Robertson because he was a former Yankee. So yeah, I think when you look at the Astros bullpen, they were very, very good. Not talked about enough for what they were able to do in the regular season. They led the entire major leagues, AL and NL, in bullpen ERA, bullpen strikeout rate. They allowed the second fewest home runs per 9 innings out of the bullpen, and they also led in bullpen wins above replacement. They led the entire majors in all those categories. So you could say, based on those numbers, logic bears that they were the best bullpen in baseball this year. And that's continued into the postseason, where 8 pitchers, the 8 pitchers I talked about, have thrown a total of 33 innings, and they've only allowed 3 runs. All solo home runs, 43 strikeouts, and they've held the opponents to a 127 batting average. So, and it's even more devastating when your starting pitching is so dominant because the lineups don't get any sort of reprieve when the Astros go to their bullpen because their bullpen's dominant, just as dominant as their starting pitching in some cases. So I think that's their big advantage. The depth in their bullpen is another thing that you have to have come postseason, and the Astros have it. They trust any of those guys in any situation. So I think that's going to be the difference. The depth of the Houston's pitching also. I think when you go past Nola and Wheeler, it's a little bit of an unknown past that, what you're going to get on that particular night from like a Ranger Suarez or a Noah Syndergaard. Although he has postseason experience, I think you know what you're going to get from a Lance McCullers. You know what you're going to get from a Javier or Urquidy on the Astros side of things. So I think that's where the difference is. Depth in pitching. We know both offenses are going to hit, but depth in pitching. And I do think that he's been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the postseason, but I think he's been saving it for this time, and Jose Altuve will win the World Series MVP.
Okay. Yeah, I like that pick a lot. But you mentioned the Phillies. They got a puncher's chance. What are we talking? Are we talking like a Draymond Green punch? Or are we talking like a Mike Tyson punch? Or like
I think they have a Mike Tyson puncher's chance of winning this series. But
it's quite the punch.
Meaning, I think they're going to take this series back to Houston, and the pressure is going to be on Houston. And I won't be surprised if they're like up 2-1 after the first 3 games. I think they're going to be a couple swing games in this series where like the Phillies take back home game or home field advantage by like winning game 1 or game 2. Then they go back home. They have a real good performance in front of that raucous Philly crowd, which has been great so far this postseason. And they go up 2-1, and everyone's talking about the Phillies, and then the Astros come back and bounce back big by winning the next 2 games. But then the Phillies win Game 6. I think it could be that sort of like swing game swing in this series.
Back and forth momentum. Yeah,
back and forth, and one bounce or two goes your way in a close series like that. They could definitely end up winning this series.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good shot, but they have to continue to hit home runs. That's been their formula. It's a formula that works if you can do it in the postseason. People say, "Oh, well, if you hit home runs in the postseason, you can't win." No, you just have to be able to do it. A lot of the teams that rely on that end up not being able to hit enough in the postseason. And that's why people have that view. But if you do it like the Phillies, and you have guys like Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber who get hot at the right time, it definitely works. The Braves did it last year. Look at what Jorge Soler did in the World Series last year for the Braves. He had a ton of home runs. I think that's what it comes down to. I'm super excited, and we'll recap the World Series when it ends. We'll sort of do a wrap up to the season, maybe some other things as well, and we'll start to lay out for you guys what our off-season baseball coverage is going to look like. We haven't talked about it yet, but we will be talking about it, and we'll let you guys know on our World Series recap. So enjoy the last 4 to 7 games of this baseball season, and we'll see you later tonight for our NFL and college football picks, plus NFL Parent Leader. Do you have anything you want to say?
Just make sure to tune in tonight. It's going to be pretty late because it'll be after my work shift. But if you're free, if you're available, and you love football talk, tune in tonight. We're going to be covering the college football games, mostly NFL this week. We have a really extensive NFL slate. So stay tuned for all that. And that's it. Yeah.
Just like the Major League Baseball season after the World Series, we are going, gone. See y'all tonight. Peace out.
Peace.